Welcome to this video on collecting security data. As part of the security test or assessment, we need to collect certain type of data that will help us perform our security assessment or our security test. And we also want to have the data as evidence so that we can get managed approval based on the result. Now, the data that we are going to collect is really just all of the output data that's generated by all of our security controls. A lot of security controls we implement will generate some type of data or some type of output, and that's what we want to collect. And why this is important is for us to have a successful test assessment or a successful audit. This is all going to be dependent on the inputs that we provide to those tests, to those assessment, and to those audits. So we need to collect that data based on the purpose and the scope of whatever we are trying to test or assess. Now, when you perform a security test or an assessment, you are going to find that the quality is going to depend on one of the three things. It's going to depend on the scope of what you are trying to test, the time you have to test it, and the cost it's going to test. Okay, so it is basically a project management principle called the triple constant. If any of these are impacted, if the time is impacted, cost is impacted, or the scope is impacted, then your quality is going to be impacted. So what we have to determine is what we are really trying to accomplish with the security test. So basically, if any of these side of the triangle are affected, the two other areas are going to be affected as well, and this constraint will apply 100% to the quality. So the more data we collect, the scope, and the more time and money the assessment will cost, right? But if the test needs to be done quickly, then the more resources we need to throw at this cost, and the scope is going to have to decrease because we are going to have to get this done quickly, right? So there really needs to be good balance in quality, overall the scope, and we need to understand the time and cost impact as well. That's going to determine what kind of data we need to collect to make the test the best it could possibly be. And the first place we want to start is collecting any administrative data. So we want to gather our policies, processes, procedure, and any other documentation. So we want to look for records, logs, other archive data, any of those different things that can help demonstrate completion or compliance in terms of security controls or any other previous security assessment as well. So we can use all of that information as a part of our current test and assessment, and make sure that you are considering other department as well. Finance department, human resources department, those kind of things, they might have relevant data that might be needed for the assessment. Then we need to collect our technical data. So our system log, software code, configuration file, change management record, or change control board files, things like that. Also our logical and technical data as well. And we want to review system diagrams and other system related documentation that are going to define the technical specification for system operation. So we want to be looking at the current diagrams. We want to look at the data flow diagrams if we can. We want to understand exactly what we are trying to test and what we expect as the outcome. Once we understand all of that, then we need to go to our management, our senior manager, or whomever going to sponsor this test or assessment, because these tests are going to rely heavily on their support because we can't do them by ourselves. So we need managers to allocate resources to put towards these tests and assessment, whether it's be administrator, engineer, architects, and so on. We also want to make sure that they clearly understand the purpose and scope of this test and assessment so that the proper resources are allocated to help us complete this in terms of the time, cost, and the scope of what we are trying to accomplish. The approval needs to be formally documented. We need to have this documented in a policy, a procedure, or if it's a part of change control board process or whatever it might be. But we want to get this formally approved and formally documented. We also want to clearly identify the expected outcomes, the schedule of what we are going to do with the test, what the expected start dates and the end dates, start time, end times, all those things, the risk expectation, anything that's out of scope, we want to document that, and any other information that should be part of the documentation. In other words, we want to thoroughly methodically plan this test out and get full management approval for it. So the bottom line is to understand the purpose of collecting the process data, know to collect administrative and technical data, and also know the management support and approval are needed for a successful test or assessment.